Hey guys, so I'm caring for a bunch of different geckos right now because I'm babysitting them, but this is a requested video on how to care for toads, and it's kind of important for someone right now, so I'm just going to make the video. So I'm caring for these geckos as I go along. Just a warning, these animals are not in my ideal conditions. I'm just pet sitting them, so they're not mine, so that's why they don't have like a bunch of tanks and stuff. Again, pet sitting, not my pets. Care on toads. So this video is directed towards the three common types of toads that you find in the United States, which is the southern toad, American toad, and Fowler toad. I have owned Fowler's toads before, but I haven't owned the other two, but they're the same in care, honestly. So when people are talking about these kind of toads, these toads are normally toads that they have in some way or another taken from the wild, whether that be for the safety of the toad or just for their personal enjoyment, and these are wild animals. So in most cases, it's best to leave animals in the wild alone because they that's where they're from. Like, if you had just been taken out of your home and forced to live somewhere else, you probably wouldn't be as happy as you would in the wild. There are cons and pros to both sides of the story. In captivity, there's safety, there's food from reliable sources, there's constant heat, constant food sources. In the wild, though, there's more space, more freedom, um, but it's not as safe. And I personally, from my own experiments and experience, animals, even if they're not as safe, in the wild are always happier. I know this because I used to have backyard chickens, and they were much happier free ranging and having the risk of being killed than being kept in a cage all day. So that's kind of just like a little bit of little evidence for that there. So let's get started on toad care. So for substrate, eco earth or like a pesticide free dirt that you might like find in your yard, something that the toad has already been exposed to, is good. They're not aquatic. They do need water. In the wild, they'll normally go into a lake or pond or something to breed, to drink. Well, they kind of just drink through like their skin, but they need water. And so in captivity, you just give them like a medium-sized bowl. Has to be dechlorinated because chlorine and chemicals, heavy metals, are really bad for them. And this is one reason why toads will jump into pools. They'll jump into a pool thinking it's a lake. Little do they know there's no way out and that it's heavily chlorinated, so they will be poisoned and get tired as they're trying to escape for hours, and you'll find them in like the pool filter or something. In that scenario, the toad is probably just very exhausted from what happened, scared, terrified. It's probably best to take the toad in that kind of situation, like put it into a container, give it dechlorinated water, just give it a chance to rest, and then release it the next day or 2 days from then. When it's able to move on its own and it's not like half dead, that's good. If you insist on keeping a toad from the wild, even though it's not really that good for the animal, then get in a nice setup, put a lot of plants in it to make it feel at home, and they can live like 1 to 3 years, but most of the time toads from the wild have been exposed to crickets and various animals that contain internal parasites, and it's just part of the parasite's like reproduction system to travel through something like a toad as one of the hosts. So I know I'm saying a lot, but that's because I haven't really looked the toad care up in months, and I haven't owned one in months, so I'm just like recalling information I know. So, wild insects, like just various things like you can find outside, like cockroaches, crickets, worms, they're not really something that you want to be feeding your pets because a lot of times they contain internal parasites, and this is the reason why wild animals might not live as long because they have been exposed to all these parasites and stuff. And most of the animals you'll find that are outside have some sort of parasite inside of them. It might not be affecting their life, like something that will kill them, but it probably affects them. But if you had like a captive animal, like say this crested gecko, and it has never been exposed to these parasites, and you fed it something like a parasitic cricket, it could get potentially fatally sick. Um, so if you decide to take in a cricket, I mean a toad, hopefully it hasn't been exposed to these parasites, and if it has, hopefully it's expelled them or something. You could take it to the vet and get prescribed medication based off of what parasites are in it, based off a fecal sample. And it's best to buy their feeders at a store. Crickets and dubia roaches are probably the two best staple things you could feed them. For treats, I would recommend waxworms and hornworms. I would not really recommend superworms or mealworms as their teeth are very powerful and strong and can chew through a toad's stomach, and it has happened in the past because toads don't really chew their prey, they kind of just swallow them whole. Sometimes they'll crush them, but that's not always guaranteed, especially for a smaller animal. So crickets and roaches are a must. Well, you could just feed them just crickets if you want. Don't handle them. That is something that I really don't recommend. I mean, you could hold them occasionally, but their skin is kind of porous. So we're humans, and for example, I wash my hands a lot, as most people do, because that is something that you're supposed to do if you're a human. So blah blah blah. I just wash my hands. I just put soap on it. Da da da. And then I go to touch the toad, because you're also supposed to touch your hands before touching an animal because you've been exposed to all sorts of things. I've cleaned the counter with various chemicals. I have put chemicals in my hands. My hands are probably covered in chemicals. And that's something that's fine for humans, but if you go and touch this toad, this little toad that has porous skin, and your hands are covered in all these chemicals, those chemicals are going to affect the toad. Even if you don't have chemicals on your hand, there is still humans naturally oiliness, certain chemicals, things that aren't good for toads. And no, it's not going to be a problem if you're just touching the toad to pick it up and do something, but if you're consistently handling them and bothering them, it's not good for them, especially like just amphibians in general. All amphibians, you shouldn't really be handling them. Their skin is delicate, and it's not good to touch them. So it's probably better to leave toads as like a look, do not pet. I know there's some people who are very attached to their toads and do handle them, but it's not something I personally recommend. Let's put you there for a second. But yeah, so it's better to always release the toads, and you might be thinking, oh no, the toad's gonna die, there's so many things out here that can hurt them, but that toad has been probably in captivity, in the wild for a lot longer than you think. It knows how to take care of itself, and yes, toads do die every day, but that's part of nature. There's other things that die every day. That doesn't mean it's your responsibility to go out into the wild and take every animal and try and save it, because sometimes you just gotta let them deal with themselves. It's just part of nature. So yeah, there's the risk, so many risks it could die, but there's so many possibilities it won't die. And personally, if I could choose between being stuck in a small container or being able to hop for miles and miles and miles and do whatever I want. I would rather be able to do whatever I want. So yeah, that's a little bit of toad care for you. Thanks for watching. Bye.